it's Cubs Cave Parties. Everybody's in for giving back to those in need. We're going to Club 400. Club 400. We're going to Club 400. Club 400. We're going to Club 400 Radio, alright.
Club 400 Radio, Cub fans helping Cub fans. We're here right now at Club 400. William, we got another awesome Cub fan here today. And I don't know about you, but were you a big baseball card collector when you were growing up?
You know, I actually was. This is a dirty little secret I don't think we've ever shared. When I was 14 years old, I used to work at a place called the Baseball Card Shop.
Oh.
And actually, I was too young to get paid, so the guy that I worked for paid me an hourly rate in cards, so I could just get like whatever I wanted. So I'd make $8 an hour or whatever in cards.
That's a
So
pretty
it's
good payment
crazy.
plan, yeah.
Yeah, the only thing is, though, I just read a story about a particular card that was kind of hot at the time. We would always have collectors come in and sell their stuff to us, and we'd
Right.
buy it and then turn around and resell it. And one day somebody brought in a mint, near mint, 1968 Topps set, which is the year I was born. I had no interest other than it was the year I was born, so I actually just inherited that set, left it in a box, threw it under my bed, didn't think anything about it. About 5 years later, another customer came in looking for the same thing, and my boss was like, oh, one of my employees has that exact same thing. So I ended up getting like triple what I paid for it. Well, I come to find out now, there's only one really good card from that set. It's a Nolan Ryan rookie card, and I think the set is worth like $5,000 now.
Oh,
I paid
man.
like $700 for it, so
That's
I lost on that one.
Yeah. When I collected baseball cards, I collected them for the bubble gum that was inside of them, and that was crappy bubble gum, as we
It
know.
was terrible.
But prelude to our introduction, last night I was hanging out with Eric and his wife Dawn, and I told her we're doing a baseball card today, and she ripped the crap out of me. So Don Blowney, if you're listening, this show is dedicated to you today. All right, and we're gonna make this fun because we have a great guest here.
Yeah, we do.
And we've been wanting to get him on for a while. We met him through Club 400. He comes to our events. And by the way, let me point out that our last event, he bought a ticket even though he couldn't come, and he donated. How cool is
That
that?
was super cool.
And that's what Club 400 is all about. Let's give it up for Beau Thompson. How you doing, buddy?
Hey guys, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man, our pleasure. Thank you for taking time out to be with us.
Yeah, this is great, and I love Club 400. We've known each other for I think a couple of years ago. We met at the Cubs convention a couple of years ago at Woody's winter warm up, and been to a few of the events at Club 400. And now I check the calendar and hope that I can make each event you have.
Yeah, and we are looking forward to seeing you here at Club 400 for our annual Christmas party coming up with our guest Miguel Montero, which is sold out. Sorry, everybody, but Beau, let's talk about you real quick and about your Cubdomness. How did you become a Cub fan? And you're obviously a passionate guy. I know that from meeting you. And how did that all come about with you?
Gosh, I think it was probably I was born in '82, and I think. After the '84 season, I was probably 3 years old. I was 3 years old in '85, and I had a babysitter who was just a diehard Cubs fan. And he would, his wife was my babysitter. Her husband would read names off of the roster in '85, '86, and out of Sports Illustrated. So I grew up as a young fan knowing Scott Sanderson and Steve Trout and, of course, Sandberg and those guys. So from a very young age, it was just kind of ingrained, and I never let it go. There's so many memories of being a kid and watching Cubs games on WGN and listening to 720 and just kind of growing up and now looking back, the sounds of summer. The Cubs were a soundtrack of my youth with Harry Carey and Steve Stone.
Do you remember the first Cubs game you went to?
I grew up downstate, a few hours away, so I didn't make it to my first Cubs game until the 2000s. I think 2003, 2005 was my first Cubs game. It was against the Cincinnati Reds. Um, and I think Aaron Harang was pitching for the Reds, and I think Zambrano, Big Z, was going for the Cubs that day.
Yeah, that's awesome. And was your family, were they big into baseball, or did you take this on by yourself, pretty much?
Pretty much by myself. My dad was a gearhead, and he was into mechanics and fixing classic cars. And I never, my brother inherited that gene. And my dad wasn't really into sports. He would watch a game here and there. He would watch football on Sundays. But he didn't get into the Cubs until retirement. And then he became a diehard. He would not miss a game on TV. In fact, he was not, technically sound with technology. So I had to set up, I know downstate a lot of Cubs games aren't on the air. They bounce around on different channels. So he's in the blackout zone for MLB, but I had to set up a second TV for him because some of the games were broadcast on a channel that was not on his direct TV. They were on like the local station. So I had to set up a separate TV with an antenna so he could watch the games that weren't on, the direct TV channels, so he could watch the games.
So it's pretty interesting. So basically, your dad, he wasn't a big baseball fan, but he saw that you were, and then he kind of picked up on that because of your love for the Cubs baseball, and then that probably bonded you guys together a little bit, I'm sure.
It did, and he passed away just 2 months before the World Series, and that was kind of he was battling cancer during that 2016 season, so I would try to make it down, and we would watch games as much as possible, and he said he's going to fight this thing, he's going to beat it because he wants to see the Cubs win the World Series, and unfortunately he came just a couple months shy of that awesome win over the Indians.
So that makes it an even extra special season, I think, for you emotionally and all of that.
Absolutely. And just, even though he wasn't there for the World Series, he was able to see, up until the end of August, he was able to see how special that 2016 club really was.
Well, let's face it, he had the best seat in the house. He was sitting right over Cleveland Stadium watching down on it. So
absolutely.
So, Game 7, what did that mean to you, the Cubs winning the World Series? Is that tell us about that evening, where you were, what you did, and your thoughts, and since the Cubs won the World Series, how has it changed you as a Cub fan at all?
It hasn't changed me at all. It's even 2 years later, it's still it seems surreal that it actually happened after that, getting close a few times in your lifetime, 84 and 2003. And then it finally happens. It's, even now it's like, wow, that actually happened. And the funny thing was Game 6 and Game 7 of the World Series, my now wife, her and I got engaged that summer. So 2016 was a very emotional roller coaster of a year. So we were engaged in July of 2016. We were going through wedding planning in October. And for Game 6, it was our tasting at the venue that we got married. So I skipped our wedding tasting to stay home and watch Game 6. And wow. Game 7 fell on my mother-in-law's birthday, and they went out for a family dinner. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'll never miss another one.
And the wedding
still happened. I can't miss Game 7. And the wedding still happened.
That's fantastic.
That's classic.
I love that.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, the people that are obviously listening to this podcast love baseball. They wouldn't be listening to it in the first place. But yeah, sometimes I'm like, how can anybody plan anything when the World Series is going on? Even when there's a big Cubs game, I'm like, what are they thinking? There's a big game against the Cardinals on Saturday. What are they going to this place for? I mean, it amazes me, I guess that's when you're sick like I am,
I laugh at that movie that was about the Boston Red Sox with Jimmy
Fever
Fallon,
Pitch, one of my favorite movies.
And how they were like, she had a work trip to take him to Europe or something like that, and he goes right to the schedule and is like, "Oh, but the Angels are in town," or something like that. Like it was too big of a series to go to Europe for the first time.
That movie is classic.
It's
man.
so true, isn't it? It's like, I guess behind every great Cubs fan is a great, Cubs supportive wife, hopefully.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Exactly. And I often think that about, Bears, like on Sundays. Like, who's playing anything on a Sunday when the Bears are playing? Are they crazy?
Right.
But, I guess there is other things than just sports, I guess.
I guess.
I guess.
Well, speaking of, since we all agree on that, I guess, how did you get involved with baseball cards? I mean, we all probably have our stories, and if I had $1 for every my father and everyone else that I heard, oh yeah, I had all these cards. I had Mickey Mantle rookie cards and stuff in a box. I think my mom threw them out or whatever. It's like, oh, the pain,
Yeah.
How'd you get started?
Yeah, there wasn't really. I don't have somebody that gave me their collection, or I didn't inherit anything. I think it was just a natural progression of I was a huge sports fan even as a young kid. My first cards that I remember getting were from our local small town grocery store. They had packs of 1988 Donruss was the first baseball cards I remember getting.
Fleer, Donruss, and Topps were like the three, right?
The big three.
Yeah, they were the big three in
Yeah,
the
that's what I
80s.
thought.
And then Score came out, and then Upper
Score,
Deck
yep.
came out, and then it just blew up, and
I
several
think-
companies came along.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Bo, but I think kind of Upper Deck came in and kind of because they were the first guys to come out with like cards that were just really pretty,
Yeah,
They
they
weren't more
changed
like
the game as far as a
yeah.
luxury brand.
I agree, and I remember when the first set came out, we bought like 4 or 5 complete sets, and I lost all those in a flood that I had at my house. I lost a lot of baseball cards due to a big flood I had. But yeah, I kind of wanted you to talk about just for the listeners because I go to these memorabilia shows all the time, and what I have noticed is because I'm not really a big card guy. But the card industry is alive and it is very strong. And I notice that when I go to these shows, there's just tables and tables of card dealers. They're everywhere. And it's still, right now, I mean, I'm big into game use memorabilia, but cards, if you go to these shows, that's where it's at. That's where the traders are. That's where the big buyers are. So let's talk. I would, just because there's a lot of people like us, like myself, who used to be into baseball cards, but now have kind of left. What's going on in the card industry right now, and what's big out there, and what are people collecting?
What I'm seeing lately, there's been kind of a small resurgence in the hobby of baseball cards here over the last couple of years, and I think it's kind of twofold. It's credited to some top rookies in the last couple of years who have come along. Aaron Judge just blew up the baseball card hobby 2 years ago or last year. This year, there's several hot rookies. Juan Soto at the Nationals, Ronald Acuna down with the Braves. The Yankees have Miguel Andujar and Gleyber Torres, former Cubs prospect. So those guys have all they've become super hot. And then I think another reason is guys our age are starting to feel nostalgic, whether they see an old set, once you hit your 30s, you you have more dispensable income. You go back to your youth, and it's like, hey, I remember that Jose Canseco rated rookie was $100, and now it's 20 or 10. So I can go back and I can buy these cards that I couldn't when I was 8 years old when they came out. Or they have kids who are getting to the age where they're starting to get into sports, and it takes them back to a time where they were that age and watching baseball and collecting baseball cards. So they buy them for their kids. So I think it's just kind of, several factors going into it that, nostalgia is kind of at a peak right now where whether it's movies or TV shows, things are coming back into popularity that, were popular in the 80s and 90s.
Did either of you guys, I'm probably dating myself a little bit here, I'm being the oldest one in the room, did either one of you guys ever collect a set by buying packs? You talked about buying like a complete set.
Right.
But back in the day, they didn't even have
No.
complete sets. You'd had to buy packs,
And that was the fun part of it.
and then trading.
And
too.
that's what. But that's a great question. And I was going to ask you on top of that, Bo, if you could answer William's question. But right now, because I don't know, I'm asking you, and this could be a stupid question, but are people still buying individual packs of cards, or are they buying them like, has sets, or are they buying boxes of cards and opening up all the packages inside there? What's going on out there? Because I don't even know how this is working.
Well, that's kind of changed. Well, first I'll answer William's question. I did buy packs to complete sets back. I remember 89 tops, 90 tops, and 90 Fleer were three of the big sets that I collected. And then my collection kind of changed, whether it was collecting Cubs or other things. But the way people are buying now, it's changed somewhat, because back in the 80s and 90s, baseball card shops, hobby shops were just everywhere. I grew up close to a town with like 10,000 people, and there were 4 or 5 baseball card shops in that small town. And now you don't see that. I live in Madison, Wisconsin, 250, 300,000 people, and a flood just wiped out one of the hobby shops a couple months ago, but there's one card shop in this, larger city. So kind of how people are buying now, there's a lot of retail outlets which have acquired, there was even cards at Walmarts and Targets back, in the 80s and 90s, but now they've developed what's called a blaster box. And it's basically 7 or 8 packs of tops, Bowman, what have you. And for $20, you get like 8 packs in these retail blaster boxes. They still do have some loose packs in Targets and Walmarts, but kind of the popular thing in the retail sector is the blaster boxes, where you get 8 packs for $20. And there's still hobby boxes, which are a complete box of unopened packs that are sold at hobby shops or online. So that's kind of where things are going, as far as where things are at, as far as how people are acquiring packs. Really aren't. That's how we grew up. We opened packs, but now it's basically you're opening boxes, whether it's the $20 box at Target or the $80 box from a card shop.
See, I find that interesting, because that's what I kind of thought, because you don't see baseball packs like when you're checking out somewhere. You don't see a little box with wax paper.
Well, the
cards,
other thing is, and I know obviously inflation has changed everything, but they're so expensive now. Like, you used to be able to buy a pack for 25, 30 cents, one
Right.
pack. And now today, like, the cheapest thing is probably $10. That, like, even at Walmart and Target, it's tough to get things for like the quarter you have in your pocket or whatever, like back in the day.
Oh yeah, you have to have $5 at least to get a pack. But I would ask you this question, Bo. By the way, everybody, we're Beau Thompson. We'll talk about his 1 million Cubs project here. But when you go into a Walmart, like for instance, I was just at Walmart Target the other day, and I saw this pack of cards. It was a box. It was like, we call it a blaster. Now I know what it's called, a blaster, box or whatever. And it was like $80, but it said guaranteed to have like a 1 auto inside. Is that obviously that's right now is where it's hot, is trying to get autographed cards that are authenticated, right?
Yeah, and that was probably, there's a couple products that you'll find in retail that do have those guarantees. Topps Fire is one of them, which is a retail only product. And Bowman Platinum is another. So those are, a little more expensive, because there's a guarantee that there's, 1 or 2 autographs in a box. And that's kind of, that's a big reason why the boxes are a lot more, where in 1989, you buy a box of Topps for $20, you're going to get all what is considered base cards, which is just a common card, whether it's a rookie or a SAR or a common. And now that you have hobby boxes, they're 80 or 100 or even more, but you get guaranteed what they call hits, where it's either a autograph or it's a relic, which is a piece of jersey or bat or base. So you have a little more incentive in buying those boxes.
What are those cards? I mean, some cards come with multi autographs on there. Like there was a famous card that had, I think, Bias on there, and like the up and comer top prospects, and there's 3 autographs on there. Those are pretty cool. What are they? Are those just straight up autograph cards, or there's a name designated for those cards where there's multiple autographs on one card?
Those are just auto cards. It kind of depends on I guess what set it is. But yeah, those are autographs, and some have different names. Whether depending on which set it comes from, if it's just a regular Topps issue, or they have a lot of different. Topps has the license for Major League Baseball, so only Topps can produce sets that feature logos and team names. But there's a hierarchy of Topps, and then Topps has a Bowman product, and different sets from Topps, triple threads and high tech, and all these different brands.
Gotcha. That's interesting. I did not know that about the Topps. So like you buy. That was the one question I was going to ask you. How many different card companies are out? Like when we were growing up, we talked about earlier. We had like the big 3 and then Score. But how many different card companies are out there right now?
Right now, there's really only a few left. Topps is your main one, and then Panini would be the number 2 brand.
I thought that was the sandwich I had last night.
Yeah. So Panini owns the rights to the Donruss brand and the Score brand. So they're still Donruss and Score, and they're under the Panini umbrella. And they do not have an official license. There's just one, and it's Topps. And then Upper Deck is Panini actually owns the license for NFL and NBA, and then I think hockey NHL goes under Upper Deck. So Upper Deck's still around, but they're definitely not as up there like they were 25 years ago. And then Leaf is still around in a smaller market as well.
So there's not as many as you might think. Then that sounds like there's really not. Then
no, there's not as far as brands themselves go. There's not, but underneath each, your Donruss and Score is still around, but it's underneath the Panini brand. Bowman is under the Topps brand, so they all have, Topps owns several of the, former brands, and then Panini and Leaf and Upper Deck.
So we need to have you tell us about the project you're working on. Stu and I have this spreadsheet that we have on our table here, and we were trying to run the numbers and figure out like how is it humanly possible to get to 1 million. Now neither one of us can count that high, so it was a little bit of a struggle, but on a serious note, tell us what you're doing and what you're trying to do and why and all that kind of good stuff.
Well, I've accumulated a bunch of cards over several years. I've acquired collections off of Craigslist and garage sales, flea markets, auctions, and I got to a point where I just had over 1 million cards, and most of them I don't want. And I've done trades over the years where I'll trade 500 Red Sox cards for 500 Cubs cards. And when I buy new products, I always pull the Cubs, right? And I always pull the Cubs cards aside and stuff them away. And I thought, well, I have all these cards. I might as well trade my 1 million cards that I don't want for 1 million cards that I do want, which are Cubs. And I thought I can do trades through Facebook groups and on Twitter. But if I don't really have, something to set me apart, it's going to take me a really long time to make these trades. And even when you do have a blog and, a social media presence, it's going to take a long time. 1 million cards is a lot of cards. So that's kind of where I wanted to market it as the 1 million Cubs project, just to get my name out faster. To find collectors that are wanting to trade. So it's been pretty successful so far in getting trades. I just ran some numbers. I've done trades with 85 different people on Twitter alone, and in a lot of those we've done multiple trades, 3 or 4 trades.
That's pretty awesome. And here's my question, because back in, I don't know, it was a couple. We were gonna have you on a while back, and it fell through. But I did the math. Is there even a million Cubs cards out there? Because I was looking at the Cubs roster from early 1900s, and I think I could be wrong about this, and I could make myself look like a dummy. And that number does sound low, but I think there's a right around 2,300 to 2,500 Cubs that are put on the Cubs uniform. So if we do the math on that, is there even a million Cubs cards out there? That's my question.
There's probably not. And so my collection.
But you're young, so that's
duplicates.
good, right? So that was my question. So duplicates do count in your collection.
Duplicates do count. Yep,
okay,
absolutely.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, because I was always wondering that too. Are you counting duplicates? And then, but like you said, you're a young guy. How old are you again?
36.
So this could be like a lifelong project.
You got plenty of time.
Yeah.
Oh, sure. I just got a trade the other day, and I in the box there were 58 of the same 1988 Donruss Sean Dunston cards.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, they definitely count.
So you're logging these in because I've read your blog. I follow you on Twitter. What else are you on? You're on Twitter. I know that.
Yep.
Tell everybody where they can find you at. So somebody might have a bunch of Cubs cards and they want to just give them to you. How do they find you?
On Twitter, I'm at 1 Million Cubs. The 1 Million Cubs project is also on Facebook. Let's see, 1millioncubs.net is the blog site. And from there, there's linked to my Gmail account as well.
Now, all right, I got to ask a question here. Stu just mentioned that you log all your cards.
I try.
Okay. Do you have your original million cards that you had logged?
No.
Okay. So it's just the Cubs
a lot of the newer stuff is sorted by either team or by year and set. And eventually, right now I'm in the early stages of sorting the Cubs themselves, and I'm going to do it by player last name. So in the A's, I have Paul Ossenmacher and Albert Almora, Jake Arrieta, and I'll put those in large boxes by letter, and once I get the box full, I'll start sorting them into player, and then I'll log them. There's a website called Trading Card Database where you can submit your collection. They have the checklists, and you can track how many cards you have, and all that. So eventually I'll get to that point.
So here's the big question. You got married last year or 2 years ago. Was that 2 years ago? 16?
Last year.
Oh, last year.
17.
Okay. 17. Yeah. You got married last year. When did you start 1 Million Cubs Project? Was that before or after you got married? Did she know about this before you got married?
In other words,
bring this on after
a prenuptial with details in there?
Yeah, she knew of my my sickness, my baseball card sickness, before we got engaged. So she it's kind of grown. So she's well aware. I started the project right around Christmas last year. So the end of December is
it was
kind
after
of when
you got
the wheels were in
married. It was
motion.
after.
Yeah, it was.
Where are you
post-marriage.
storing all these cards? That's my next question.
I have
because that's got to be a lot
room.
of cards. Yeah, I mean.
Yeah. We need a larger basement. I do have a card room that's completely full, and then adjacent to the card room is a closet that's probably 15 feet by 8 feet, which is completely jam-packed with boxes about 8 feet high from front to back. So that's kind of where the when I acquire large collections, I'll pull what I want, and the good cards, and then I'll just kind of put them away, and eventually I'll get around to sorting them. So
all right, I have a question, and that is, are you displaying any, or are you doing anything that allows you to enjoy the cards? Because I have probably, if I were to guess, 100, 200,000 cards in boxes, hopefully well protected in an like attic in the garage, protected from the weather and stuff. I haven't looked at in 20 years. Like I could care less that I have them or not. I tried to will them to my kids, and they're like, they could care less. So So I'll go. I was getting physically nauseous thinking about going through them and trying to find all the Cubs cards for you, but I might take a swing at that. But are you doing anything to enjoy it? Like I'm sitting here right now in Utopia, as you know, in Club 400, and I'm, getting lost looking at a base from Wrigley Field and stuff like that, and everything is so, well presented here and stuff like that. Do you do anything that you get to like enjoy your favorites, anything, or are they all just boxed up?
Well, a lot of them are just boxed up. Some of the better cards, I do have, in my man cave, finished area of the basement. I do have, a few shelving units. So, I'll put on display some of the tobacco cards from the early 1900s, some of my nicer Javier Baez cards. My oldest card is from 1887. It's an old Judge of Duke Farrell. So I have that on display. And then I have a few on the walls. I have a few display cases where I've got a display of Javi Baez, a display of the 2016 Topps World Series Cubs set, and then some of the older cards from the 40s and 30s, 40s, and 50s.
I was going to ask you with the cards. You've made 80 deals. Part of in collecting, first of all, anything is you get into, you meet a lot of interesting people that have the same hobbies as yourself. I'm sure you've met many awesome people like yourself who collect cards and so forth. You've made 80 deals. You met 80 people. What's one of your most memorable trade that you ever made with anybody?
I've and I'll preface that answer with that's kind of what I've been enjoying the most about this. Initially it was I just want to get rid of 1,000,000 cards so I can have 1,000,000 Cubs. But then I started making these trades and I started meeting people on Twitter and corresponding with people and fellow collectors. And then, I want this done in 5 years. I want to get to 1,000,000 cards in 5 years. Now I don't care because I'm having the journey is fun.
Yeah, right.
And now
that's what it's all about. In the big scheme of things, you got this hobby and you turned it into, and I know that you've inspired other card collectors to do the same. I saw somebody on Twitter, like I don't know if it was a Yankee fan or a Boston fan. I'm gonna collect 1,000,000 Yankee cards or whatever it was.
Yeah, and that's the fun part. And now 1,000,000 is just a number, and people were asking, well, what are you going to do when you get to 1,000,000? Well, go for 2,000,000. I don't know. I don't know. So it's the journey that has become the most fun, and that's what I'm enjoying the most about all this. So I met early on, and this was probably February, March. There was a guy on Twitter who posted a picture of 50 monster boxes, and a monster box is a large white box that can hold 5,000 cards. And somebody had posted, I want all the Minnesota Twins out of that box. And the guy said, well, he goes, I'm not sorting them, but you can have them if you pick them up. So I'm like, ooh. So I looked at the guy's profile, and he's from Sterling, Illinois, which is about 2 hours from Madison. And I grew up about 30 minutes south of Sterling. So I reached out to him and I'm like, hey, what do you want for all those monster boxes that you don't want? And he's like, just pick them up.
Really?
And I'm like, oh, come on. So on a Sunday afternoon, I drove down to Sterling, and I'd actually he's a Cardinals fan, and I pulled a Harrison Bader autograph from Topps, and he reached out to me and said, hey, what do you want for that card? And I'm like, call it even. You're going to give me all these cards. I'll just give it to you. So we've actually done three trades in person. I've drove down to Sterling. He gets these boxes from a card shop. He takes what he wants out of the boxes, and he doesn't want anything for them, but I always bring down. I went to the Pearl Jam concert at Wrigley, and I picked him up a poster. One trade, I took him down some New Glarus beer. So I don't want to go in empty-handed. I mean, the guy's being so nice to give me all these cards that I've got to give him something. So those are the fun stories that along the way that you develop these friendships with fellow collectors.
I have one more question for you. How much does the quality of the card? I know they're big into ratings today, like your Perfect 10 and other types of companies that rate the cards and stuff like that. Is that a big factor in what you're doing, or are you just going for 1,000,000 cards?
I'm just going for 1,000,000 cards, and it depends on what it is. If it's a tobacco card um, that I'm looking to buy, I want it at least authenticated. It doesn't have to be graded, but there's so many really good reprints out there that can be deceiving. So if it's something like that I'm going to put some money into on a vintage card, I want it authenticated. And there's some cards that I want in like PSA is one of the main graders, and a PSA 10 is like the gem mint perfect card. So there's a couple. I have a Chris Bryant rookie that's a PSA 10. I have Ty Griffin. For some reason, I love Ty Griffin.
Wow.
As a young kid. He had a 1989 Topps Future Stars card, and that was like my first favorite card. So I'm trying to acquire PSA 10s of Ty Griffin, which can be had for $5-10. So I have some of those, and some cards I like the grade, but overall, as long as it's authenticated vintage, the grade doesn't really matter to me.
Part of the cool thing about collecting these cards is seeing all the players that played for the Cubs. And I'm sure you have noticed that we've had a lot of sucky players on the Cubs. I'm sure you go back to memory lane and be like, holy crap, I forgot we had this guy on the team,
Right. And that's the fun part. That's another fun part where I'm looking through cards, and Vance Law was...
he was good. What are you talking about?
He was good. He was an all-star. But what I'm...
It was funny. I posted a picture of Vance Law on I think it was the 87 or 88 team.
Uh-huh.
They had to do some photoshopping because they showed him he was like cut. I don't know if you saw that picture I posted.
Yes, I did. Yes,
there's no way he was that cut.
Right.
He's a wimpy guy.
I loved Vance Law. He was an all-star in I think 88, and he had those big glasses. And I loved Vance Law, and he's on Twitter. And I when I found him on Twitter, I'm like, oh man, one of my favorite Cubs from 88, 89 is on Twitter. And he sent me a direct message, and he goes, hey, I've got a bunch of my old cards that companies gave me. He goes, do you want some? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So he sent me 10 autographed cards of him from, 88, 89, 90.
I think I saw you posted that. That's cool.
That's
that was
really
awesome.
cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
So yeah, it's some, and I didn't mean to follow up the the crappy players, but it's guys that you don't remember, or you do remember, but it's like, oh, it's been so long since Vance Law. Wow, it's been 30 years since he played. So yeah, when you're coming across, Paul Ossenmacher is one that it seems like I have thousands of Paul Ossenmacher cards for some reason.
I mean, we all remember when Tuffy Rhodes was on pace to hit like 400 home runs.
Right.
Right. I mean, he's got maybe one year he was on the Cubs. That was it, right?
Right. I think so. Yeah.
So Club 400 Nation, I want you guys to go in your attics, check in your closets, grab your baseball cards, bring them here to Club 400, and I'll make sure
Just the Cubs.
Bo gets them. Just the Cubs. Yeah, go
Cubs
through them.
cards. Yeah, don't bring anything else.
Don't forget either, Bo. Tell your wife that true love is helping you go through these cards and logging them in.
Yeah.
I don't think she'll buy that.
Well, you can tell her that anyway.
Well, Bo, thanks a lot for coming on today. Like I said, hey, bring your cards here, and I'll make sure Bo gets them. And, yeah, we'll have you back on when you hit 1 million. We'll bring out the Jägermeister, bring out the beer, and we'll have a big party.
Hey, sounds good. I can't wait for the Christmas party.
All right, everybody, check out Beau Thompson on Twitter, 1 million cards. He's got a big project going on. He's another unique and awesome Cub fan, and we were happy to have you on today. Let's go get him, Bo. We'll talk to you later, buddy.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Now, the end is near, and so I face the final curtain. My friends, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain.